So let me take a little departure here, but I want to talk about something that we have found over the last couple of years, especially that is really, really important. And you might want to jot this down, barriers to entry. And I'm just going to really quickly cover four things. What's interesting is that this was something that we didn't learn until we started communicating with clients and hearing from our advisors directly about some of the things that they were encountering. And then we kind of dove into it a little bit deeper. And we found that a lot of these barriers to entry, all of them exist. I'm just going to cover four here, but they exist in the mind of the client to the point where they really aren't even aware of them until we kind of raise the issue, or raise the idea. And it was really interesting. And so think of this now. We're talking about whether your clients can talk about you or whether or not they feel compelled to do so. And we've talked about the dramatic difference there. I think you'd agree with me that if there are philosophical or emotional barriers to entry, none of that's going to happen. So let's talk a little bit about that and how we've helped our advisors overcome those barriers to entry. Number one, we found is what's expected of me. And this really happened in first meetings, first appointments, mainly with prospects, but indeed a little bit with reframing best clients that haven't been to an appointment like this in so long. But really it happened with prospects. And what's interesting is when we talk to them, they would come in and sit down. And of course, what's going on in the mind of a new prospect? Yeah, what do I have to buy? Am I going to be sold something? What do I have to do here? And so we took a step back and started to ask some questions. And in all of these, there were personal stories that I had that really made me connect with what clients were thinking. And in this one, I thought, I've shared with all of you that I fly a lot, and occasionally I'm smart enough to actually try to read something when I'm in the air. So I'm reading a book, I'm turning the pages, I go through 3 or 4 pages, I see the words, I read the words. Flight attendant stops by and says, "Hey, would you like more coffee?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, fantastic." And I look up, then I look back at the book, and it hits me. I'm like, I don't remember. No, I can see something. I don't remember a single thing that I read. Have this ever happened to any of you? Yeah. I'm like, what just happened? Or have you ever been at home with your kids or with your spouse or your partner or whatever and say, and I know with my wife, she's asking questions and saying, we're having this conversation. I'm like, yeah, sure. Right. I agree for sure. And then she'll say, so which one of those times works best? And I'm like, oh no. So what's happening? Somewhere in our minds, there's another conversation going on. And if it happens in personal and everyday life, it happens in the mind of a client when they sit down, or a prospect when they sit down with you for the first time, wondering what's going on. And so while you're making a meaningful presentation, they have this other conversation going on in their head that's getting in the way. How do we overcome that? An agenda. Simple. No rocket science. None of what we've done through all of this, as you know, is I say this over and over, it's not rocket science, fundamental human communication. And we tell our advisors, and listen, your agenda, it's not 10 or 12 or 15 bullets, it's 4 or 5. Welcome and introduction about our approach and process. What's important to you? Are we a good fit? Next steps. Things like that, and we can help with that. And we tell our advisors, look, if you have the opportunity, you've got contact information, email that to the client a couple of days before the meeting. Don't say anything. Say, looking forward to seeing you. Maybe some directions to the office. If that's not possible, make sure that early on, there's a printed agenda that you have and you put it in front of the clients. Immediately now, what has happened? First of all, they know what we're going to do here. So it quiets the background voice. Secondly, maybe more importantly, you've held yourself to an accountability standard. If there are 4 or 5 things on the agenda, I can't get all off track here. I've got to stay on point. And the clients know that. It quiets the voice and overcomes objection number 1, barrier to entry number 1, what's expected of me. Number 2, this was a big one. And some of my colleagues and friends know that way, way, way back, I was in the pet business. And not just pet store business, when it was something. I was the manager of 4 of the biggest stores in the nation, South Florida, back in the day. And I pretty much lived in and ran the largest store. At that time, it was about 15,000 square feet, unheard of. There was no Petcos or or PetSmart or any of that. We were breeding exotic birds and had the exotic cats in the store. It was like a circus. It was amazing. And I loved it. It was a big part of my life. And I had a mentor of mine who had hired me. He was the executive director, the executive manager of these 4 stores. And I will never forget, big burly guy from Barbados. I loved his accent, taught me so many things. I will never forget him coming to the store one day. This was in Fort Lauderdale. And he walked in and he said, "Hey, I just want to ask you some questions." He goes, "What do you do here?" And I went, "What?" I'm like, I think I was in my late 20s at this point. He's like, "What do you do here?" I go, "I'm the manager. You hired me." He goes, "Okay, all right." He goes, "Tell me about your day." And I said, "Well, he goes, "Specifically, I want to know about your day." I said, "Well, I come in, I park around the back, and I was kind of being a smart aleck. So I open the back door, I turn off the alarm." And he just stood there and waited for me to get through my smart alecky remarks and continue. And I said, and then I come into the store, I come from the back end of the store and I come in and we start to look at the puppies and the fish tanks and all that. And he looked at me and I knew right then where he was going to go. And he said, "You come in from the back of the store, so you don't really know what our clients, our customers are experiencing, do you?" He goes, "Once a week, I want you to park out front. I want to see if the parking lot all trashy. Do we need to have the city come and cut the grass or knock down the weeds or whatever it is? We've got this amazing, gigantic store with these big plate glass windows in the front. And are they all taking up the space with big banners and sale items, all that kind of thing? Do we need to get some stuff down and let the view into the store? What happens when you open the door and come in? We're a pet store in South Florida, for gosh sakes. And what does it smell like? What's the temperature in here? And when you walk in, we have displays all over the place. It's 15,000 feet. It's a beautiful space. And are we blocking viewpoints?" And then he stopped and he said, "What is the client experience? You don't know because you're store blind." And I'll never forget that. And so what I say to our advisor partners is, how many of you take the time to sit down with somebody that doesn't really, you have a friend that knows what you do, but they don't know what the client experience is. You have them come into your office. You walk through an appointment exactly the way it'll happen. You go through your agenda, what you present. You ask your friends, "Hey, what does this feel like? What's your experience? What does this sound like?" To overcome that store blind. It's so important. My partner at Pareto Systems, Duncan McPherson, calls this inertia confidence. Just because we're having success doesn't mean we can't get better. How do we overcome being store blind? Understanding the client experience. Barrier to entry number 2. Barrier to entry number 3 is what we call professional arrogance. I don't think that arrogance is really the right word. You remember though, in the earlier when we went through the 2 revealing exercises and we asked the 3 questions, and we're talking about this client advisory board approach with those 3 questions. Hey, what is the one thing that you value most about your relationship with us? If you could add one thing to your client experience with us, what would that be? And finally, if you don't mind my asking, when you talk about others, when you talk about us to other people, your friends or family members, what do you say? And here's what we found. Clients respond to that really in a positive way because we've heard them say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that Paul called me and asked me. I've been with Paul for 17 years. I know he's been in the business for 32 years. Well, he knows everything, or he should know everything." And they don't mean it in a bad way. They're like, "Well, he's been around for 32 years. He probably knows everything." It's amazing that he would call me and ask me really intimate, detailed questions about how's your client experience. Further, we've had clients say, "You know what, after 32 years, it's amazing that Paul said he had taken on the services of a consultant. He's trying to get better after 32 years. That's amazing." And clients respond to that in a big way. So barrier to entry number 3, overcoming professional arrogance. And then finally, it's all about you. Write these words down. Statement of intention. Statement of intention. Listen, some of you know this because we have some friends and family members in this group with us today. Our approach when we start to do brand and design is that I don't build value propositions or mission statements with my advisors. I don't believe in them. Now, that sounds arrogant in its own right, doesn't it? I don't mean it that way. So, because I believe in where those things come from, But here are a couple things for you. I haven't had many advisors that could repeat a value proposition back to me the same way twice. And that's not from a bad place. There's a lot of meaningful words and things change and all that. More importantly, if I sit down with a team, and I've done a lot of in-person coaching, 5 or 6 or 7, 8, 10, 15 people on the team, and you go around the table, oh my gosh, everybody adds their own color to the value proposition. And so it's a little bit, we don't say it the same way. That's a big deal. But what we found that was a bigger deal, we started to ask clients, what do you think about the value proposition of your organization? And they'd say things like, wow, it's really meaningful, some great words there, and they care about the industry and their clients. But those words are really all about them. I was stunned the first time I heard that. And then I thought, that's really true, isn't it? It's on your wall, it's on your placard, it's on your website. You think it's outward facing, but this goes back to maybe being store blind. We don't really know. We haven't asked clients how they receive it. We did ask clients how they receive it. So a statement of intention changes the game. And this is how we build it with you. And those of you that have participated in it, you know this. The very word intention is in and of itself outward facing. If I intend to do something, then I have to include somebody in that. So what we build is a statement of intention that covers very simply, what is it that we intend to deliver? And what type of culture do we intend to deliver it? To whom do we intend to deliver it? We have an opportunity to identify ideal clients there. How do we intend to deliver it? And what is the intended outcome? We've found that clients immediately recognize a statement of intention is about them. And you talk about professional contrast. We've talked about that throughout the presentation today. Professional contrast is obvious. We'll help you make it client facing. It goes on the website. It becomes a placard in the office. And if we really are going to compel clients to talk about us, wouldn't you agree? I think everybody here agrees. Let's overcome those barriers to entry. So yeah, I see a lot of nodding heads. That's great. I hope you got something out of that. And then in further conversation, we can address that deeply. Okay. Fantastic.